Hi everyone, welcome to the final webinar of 2024, at least mine. We're going to talk about Postman automation today, and that's a really big subject. I just gave a full day's workshop on this, just the beginning really, so we can spend 2 more days about this. We're going to discuss automation in general and automation in Postman. And most of what we're going to talk about is basically what Postman allows us to, really helps us to create the automation that we would like to have. So I'm Gil. Thank you for coming today. It's my birthday today. So I'm a trainer and a consultant, and I work and talk about all kinds of things that are related to quality and making software better. And obviously, API testing and Postman, what we're going to talk about today, is going to fall into this very big bucket. You can follow me on social media, go to the site testingguild.com or everydayunittesting.com, which is the same site. And I also post videos on YouTube, like these webinar recordings, which I do basically once a month, and short videos which go on once a week on all kinds of things that I talked and will talk about. Yes, there is a course for that. Like I said, when I do Postman training, the automation part is kind of for people who don't know this, can be like stuck at the end. But I also do training for automation on people who know Postman, done testing manually with it. And if you are interested in some kind of course, let me know. Hit me on the chat, on Q&A, or comment, or wherever you're seeing that, Gil at testingguild.com, and I'll probably get it. A story I've been telling lately. So a few years back, I was giving a training on Postman and API testing and Postman. And we were going like from the beginning, talking about APIs and what are APIs and how to send APIs in Postman. And when we got to the point when I actually pressed the button and all the requests were started running automatically, like one of the person who was sitting in there as an attendee, she was looking at the screen and says, "Wow, automation." And not a skeptical wow like I do. It's an actual wow moment. Now, I've been writing software, I think, since age 10 or something like that. And I kind of forgot this kind of magic. And it is a sort of magic, especially when we're doing this. We're creating this magic. So the automation that we're going to talk about is something that allows us to create kind of magic. What is this magic? Well, most of the magic that we're doing and we're talking about is really time-related magic. We're kind of freeing time up. Usually we're thinking about automation as something that helps us move faster, and it does. But sometimes we kind of conflate it with it saves us time, which it does, but it frees us time because usually we don't have time to everything that we want to achieve. So we're using automation to do things that either we won't do at all, again, like manual testing again, like regression manual testing, or do it and kind of rely on what we get from it. And this frees us time to do something else, like more testing on new features or exploratory testing, stuff like that. And it is kind of magic if you think about it. So that's the light side of this magic. There is a dark side, though. Now, it's not really a dark side, mostly, but it comes with a cost. And this is something that most people, especially people who sell automation tools and automation processes, stuff like that, don't tell you. But I will, because I'm honest and this is my birthday. And automation is programming. So if you're a manual tester, which I don't like really the term, but a lot of people say the manual tester, okay, a tester who does things manually or semi-automatically, relies on the developers to do the development automation for them. They just use what they are given in order to test the system. We see automation as maybe an upgrade to what we do, which may be, but if you actually want to do this well, it's almost like getting a second profession, maybe the main one. So programming is a set of a lot of skills that developers learn. They are not born with it. There are skills. You can learn too, and you can improve, and you can practice, and you can get better, just like developers do. But it's not just writing bits of code, like, or asking an agent or AI agent to do this for you, because a lot of the time we spend on automation is not necessarily writing the automation, but living in it, the maintenance, the changing of code, and so on. So I'm not saying this as a way to deter you from automation. No, I think that if you gain skills in anything, it will be valuable. But I want you to understand, and I'll show you example, a good example for a bad thing in Postman later, of what it means to be a master of automation or an automation engineer or something like that. So I want you to keep in mind that Postman, I haven't said it, it is a good tool, obviously, for API testing, and it does a lot to help us move towards this thing of automation. Like, it gives us tools, capabilities. I will also talk about what it doesn't give us in terms of like creating the next steps of automation. So it looks like a good tool to start learning the basics of automation. But I just want you to remember that it doesn't stop there. Like, if you want to be a good practitioner of automation, and that means like spending a lot of your time in automation, you have to be a lot better in programming than what Postman will give you. So Postman is really not your only hope, but it does things well. And when I talk about Postman as a good tool for API testing, I usually talk about its UI and visualization capabilities, because it kind of takes something very complex, like sending an API request and seeing the response, and understanding what can, because it's basically text, right? Visualizing what happened, kind of give you insight of what actually happened, and so on. Plus, like I said, it gives you tools like I'm going to show you today inside it to do the next step, which what we usually do is that we don't like spend our time working on one API or one request. We kind of do things in sequence. And when we do that, Postman is there to help us with like getting the automation that we want. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Not everything, but what you'll see today is like the most of the stuff to begin with. What we're going to talk about are a couple of things. First, we're going to talk about variables, explain what they are and what they are in Postman. We're going to talk about chaining requests and how we do that. And spoiler, it works on variables. We're going to talk about tests, which is kind of something that should be clear to everyone when you were saying tests, what's happening here, what are tests? No, Postman kind of changed the meaning of tests like 3 times now. So we're going to talk about what are actual tests in Postman, what they mean and how to use them. And during that, I'm going to talk about something fairly new, which is the postbot, which is because everything puts AI in their code. In the product, Postman did that as well. So it's called a postbot. And I'll show you what it does today at the end of 2024. It will probably get better in time. Okay, let's go into Postman, because what we're going to do is not only things in Postman, but things that are live in Postman, which is kind of scary. So I'm going to use the site gorest.co.in, which is a nice sample site, live site, kind of worked like 10 minutes ago when I tested it. So you can like, it's a good if you're starting out with APIs, it's a good place to start doing. You can post data to it and read data from it. And my examples will be on that. Cool site if you're starting out. So what do we have? Basically, you can see the API. We're going to focus on basically you have users there, which you can add users and stuff like that, and users can have posts. What you see on the screen basically is a get API for the user. Ignore this, we'll get that in a second. And this is user number 758, blah, 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 and get me this user's posts. And when I do that, let's see if it works now. Yes, it works. So you see it brings me a JSON with an array of items, and each one of these is a post. So for a second. Now, if I did this and I do this manually, this is how I would do this. Now you see the small box. Let me not just ruin this, but ruin this. So same request. When I select some text, it pops up a message saying, would you like to set this as a variable? And would I ever? And when I click on the plus, it gives me a couple of things. First of all, the existing variables that we have, we're going to talk about what they are, and the ability to set a new variable. So before I'm going to do this, what are variables? Okay, so variables have a kind of strange name when we're talking about this in the 21st century. But if you recall your first meeting with the computer, usually what we have is, when we're talking about memory, is like the memory that we're allowed to change. And therefore, everything can be changed. And therefore, what is a variable, because variable, basically, we're talking about a place in memory when we can store things and get things. But the word variable comes from an era when some of the computer's memory was a read-only memory, RAM, and you couldn't change that. So that is why we're talking about variables. And the name stuck. So we're stuck with it. So basically, variables are where I can put things in places where I can get to them later. You saw that when I let's do this again. Of course, it doesn't. Set as variables. When I do a set of variable, and you saw that a couple with the images near them, I can give it a name, like new ID. And I can give it a value. And you can see that I need to give it a scope. Basically, Postman works with different variables with different scopes. The first one that we'll see in a minute is local variable, things that appear in functions. If I declare variables in functions, only the function or the scope of the where I write the code can access them. If I try to access them from another request, for example, I will not be able to do this. The other things are collection variables, like you see here, or environment variables, or global. Now, we're not going to talk about environment variables today. It's a whole different show. But collection variables is saved with the collection, all this thing here. And it will be exported with that. So all the requests within a collection can access this variable, set it, reset it, read it. There's also global variables, which are accessible to every request in all the collections in our workspace. So this is like scope. I'm going to set it for a collection. And you see it's kind of turned blue. If I hover over it, you'll see the value. And where's my console? Let's clear that. If I send this again, what is actually being sent is the value. It embeds the value of the variable here. And the notation in Postman for variables is the double braces. So basically what I did, like stuck the number inside something that I can use. Where can I see that? Well, this is a collection variable, right? So I can go to my collection here, and you'll see a variable tab, and you'll see a new ID with this value. Its current value is this, its initial value is this. Currently the values are the same because I haven't changed it, but I can change it now either manually like this or programmatically like I'm going to do so. So these are variables like what I've shown you until now is how to store stuff, which is nice. But the cool thing is that if I store stuff, I can do this between requests. And this is the power that I get. So let's look at chaining. So let's say I have this this sequence. I have an add user with this body. If I do this and it works, it doesn't because the email already taken. So let's do what I should have done before. Get the users. And what you're seeing right now is regular proper thing. Where's my email? Not the same email. Why is that? It doesn't give me the email again. Live thing. Let's do this. You need to change the email. Okay. So it created a new record, gave me back the response of the ID is 75809. That's a new one, dynamically generated ID, and it gives me back all the things that I sent it, which is very cool. So if I want to check next the get and the delete, I will copy that and go to the get user and replace what I have this here, and I will get back these things here. And if I do a delete, I'm going to stick it here. Get a 204 is like the in go rest. Tells me that it's okay. It was deleted, just doesn't return any content. As you can see, there's no message in the delete. So this is like a manual workflow that is something that I will probably want to test if I was checking something about users. Excellent. I want to automate that. So I can take the ID and stick it in a variable, right? Only there's a bit of a problem. Remember that, let's look at the response for the add. This thing is not part of the URL or something like that. And it's going to be generated dynamically every time that I'm going to get a new ID. So I need a way to extract this. Now, how do I do that? We're getting to chaining. Now, obviously, if I did this, let's look at the code, bring it up. Okay. So every request in Postman, you have a tab near the body that is called scripts. Script is can have two panes: the pre-request, which is code that will run before the request, and post-response, which will run after the request is completed. So programmatically, what I need to do is after I completed the add user and I got the response, I need to what we call parse the JSON that I get. Remember, it looks like this. And I need to extract the ID and put it in a variable. So this is what this code does. Now, the code that we're talking about, the language is JavaScript. I talk about the end, what kind of JavaScript it is. And I get an object called PM. This is a global object in Postman because PM stands for Postman. And it allows me to get things. So pm.response.json will retrieve the JSON that I got, and I can put it in a variable. And it also passed the JSON from text to something I can actually extract information from. So JSON data.id will get me the ID. And then I can use PM, again, the global Postman object, to put pm.collectionVariables.set, set the value of the ID in the user ID. And console log is my way of logging stuff in the console. So let's run this and see what happens. Gonna clear it. Okay, what happened? I stored the user ID undefined. Why is it undefined? Let's see what happened. Of course, again, I'm trying to do something with an existing email. So let's try that again. Something that doesn't exist. Okay. Let's clear the console and do it again. By the way, I'm going to keep all the mistakes that I'm doing in the recording, because these are actual things that happen when you're trying to get to automation. You're going through manual steps and you discover things. So you decide to work around them, change the data, so on. So you get the whole package. Okay, so I'm going to try doing add again. And this time it will succeed because it doesn't have this email. And this is what I got from this. So again, what I sent plus a new ID. And you can see, let's look at the script that runs, that it printed I stored in the user ID, the one that I actually got. So it got this JSON, parsed it. I asked it to go to the ID, and it brought this value. And it also put it in the user ID variable, collection variable, and then printed it. Let's go and see if what I'm telling you is correct. Let's go to the collection and see if the value is 961 at the end. And you can see that the user ID is not updated because there's a bug in Postman, but it is there. I know. Let's look. I have the ID in my hand, although you can't really see it here. So let's get it. Now, what happens if the variable exists? You see that I'm hovering about it. It's a 961. It's the one that I stored. One thing to know about variables: if the variable name doesn't exist in the scope, it will create it when I'm doing a set. But if it's there, it's going to update that. And what it did is update it with the value. So although you don't see it in a variable, the variable collection, in the collection, because of a bug probably, it is there. So now I can use it like a regular variable, just as before. So if I send it, you can see that it sends it but 961. Okay, where did this come from? You can look at the scripts that I have for the get, and you'll see I put something in the pre-request, which runs before that, and you can actually see that it was printed before it did the request. And you can see that what I'm doing here is retrieving the variable and printing it to see that I actually have it. Plus, it is sent because I embedded it here. This is just for demonstration purposes. I didn't need to do anything because once the value is there from the add, you can use it in get. And the same thing with the delete. No script here. You see there's no thing here. And I can send it. Excellent. So basically what I can do is stand here. Let's change it for, right, because now we know it won't work. I'm going to send body with another email, and I'm going to do here, and you see I have a run folder. Now, what will happen is when I run the folder, it will run all the requests one after another. It does this with what is called the collection runner, although I'm running a folder right now, but you can run a whole collection. It tells me, do you want to run these things? Yes, I do. A couple of things here, which I won't go into. And run Postman. Excellent. You see that I got unprocessed entity. Although I changed the email, probably didn't save it because it needs to be saved. So, but I'll take this opportunity to look at. So I didn't save it the COM3, so it was COM2. COM2 still exists. It got an error, right? So let's look at the runner again, because I want to show you this. Well, let's run it again. Don't need to run it again here. So you'll notice that although there was an error, and later it embedded the null because it didn't store anything, again, this time it's my bug. From Postman's point of view, it just ran it, and it doesn't see anything wrong with that. And if you think about it, there isn't anything wrong with that, because if we know the system and we don't change the email, we expect it to have a 422 error. So there's nothing wrong with the 422 or a 404 if we're looking for something that's not there. So we'll soon get to tests, but remember that when we're running it either manually or automatically, Postman doesn't know if the result is okay or not. So we'll need to help him understand that. What else I need to tell you about the collection runner? I can't defend this, but you can run 25 runs like this, like I did, per user per month. It's not a lot. I'm not sure why they are, and even if you have like paid subscription for Postman, it doesn't go up a lot. So what most people do is build something manually, test it a couple of times, not a lot, and run everything all the time for a command line that doesn't count for these 25 or so. So be aware. I'm not sure why they're doing this, like, really. Okay, so we have a script that usually runs if we save it correctly, and then we can also use variables to update stuff. So for example, this one has the user ID. Let's create one that actually works. You see that when I'm doing send, it actually works and updates the variable. And although I didn't save, it actually ran what I wanted. So the collection runner, and when you're running outside from command line interface or something like that, needs to be on saved information. If you're just clicking send, it doesn't count as a run, and you don't need to save also. So now I have something in my user ID, and I can get it, and this script gets a user and updates its data. So let's look at it. So this one returns this kind of JSON. That's it, the get. And what I'm doing here is getting the data. This is, remember, this is a local variable with var, and it's not the same as the JSON data from the one before. Completely different, looks the same. And this time I'm getting the status, putting it in the status local variable, and then I'm setting this value in the status collection variable. And you can see that it is active. Now, let's have a script that says if it's active, change it to inactive. If it's inactive, change it to active. You can do that. And it looks like this. So what we're doing is sending a patch. And before I'm running this patch, which will update the data, I'm running this code, which says, let's get the status from the collection variables. I can do that because it's there. I put it like a minute ago. Declare something called a new status. And if the old status is active. New status will be inactive. Otherwise, it will be active. Switch them. Once I have this new status, I will put it in the status collection variable. And then when it's there, when this runs, it will embed it here, the value of the status variable. So if I remember last time it was active, if I run this, it will update the active to inactive and return it. Only, let's try that again. I didn't, oh, it's the get, sorry. Let's run the update to see it actually works. 3, right? Yeah. You see, this is active, inactive, active, inactive. Excellent. Okay, what did I do? Well, this is the magic of programming. I needed to think about what I wanted to achieve, which is basically updating the status field into another value, and then wrote a program that does that. I needed to fetch the variable, change it according to some kind of rule here, and then update it, and then understand that it will be called when the request will run, and then I have to embed it here and understand that it will embed the new value here and send it. Okay, now this is very simple in terms of programming, but if this is your like first time looking at code, yes, this is scary. This is like what you need to do in order to use automation. Okay, I'll show you something even more complex at the end. Okay, so if I actually look at, let's close a bit. If I actually want to test this completely, I will do an get edit user, run this with all the things that we talk about. Let's not get into that. Okay, so let's talk about tests. So like I showed you in the collection runner, when something wrong from our perspective happens, Postman doesn't care if it's wrong or not, or right, he doesn't know. So we need to tell him. How do we do this? With tests. Now, I told you that tests kind of had changed over the years. At the beginning, tests was the post response that I showed you, the code that runs after the request. Then they changed that to post request and then to post response. So let's look at this. So this is a post for something. It would use the same thing. So let's again change this to 7 for it to succeed. So it will create, right? Excellent. Now, how can I tell Postman that I'm expecting 201? Well, with this. PM, the Postman object has a function called test. And this is kind of a weird JavaScript notation. Well, it's weird, and it's a JavaScript notation, which basically gets the status code is 201 as a name. And it runs whatever is inside this function block, which is pm.response to have status 201, which is kind of a readable way to check that I'm expecting a 201. You can see that I have test results pane in the response. And it actually printed here that test status code is 201 has passed. What happens if I run it again? It will not pass, right? Because it will have the same email. So let's see. What will happen is this time it tried to run it again after the script, and the name of the test is status code is 201, which is not a good name already. It's really should be 201. And then it tells me assertion error, expected response to have 201, but got 422. Now, This is an actual test. If you put it in Jenkins or TFS or another continuous integration tool, you can actually fail a test run with it. Before, what we ran before, you couldn't do that because we needed to tell Postman what is actually happening here. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how do I know all this? Well, Postman, not just like Postman stuff, how do I know how to code? And this is where Postman really, I think, did a very marvelous job by creating these snippets here. So you can see that what are snippets? Like these are like bits of code that it will create for you. So for example, I want to set a collection variable, click on that, and it creates this line of code with you. Now you need to change the variable name and what you're going to put inside. Or if I want to get a collection variable, click here. I need to put here, and all I have to do is var x equals and change the name. And what it also can do is create a test for me that the status code is 200, and then I need to check what it is. I can put a 200 or a 204 or 200 and 204. It has a lot of ways to check things, but I need to also modify this because my names will be like status code is, it's not much. And I can also do this, something that checks that the response text includes something. So the snippets give me a lot of like push towards something that I need to create. I can also do with Mr. Postbot here, you saw that it's kind of a try to publish itself all the time. So I'll do Control Alt P. Control Alt P, yeah, and it will ask me, well, what do you want to me? So I'll tell him, write a test that checks the response has an ID, which it does, right? Let's do this. Oh, not this. I want to do this. Yeah, it creates something like response body should have an ID. So far, so look good. And it wrote pm expect pm response.json to have property ID. Well, this is not exactly what yeah, it does look okay. And let's, let's look at the body. Okay, I want to run it again with 8 and see what actually happens. Okay, so it does create it, and let's see what happens. So response body doesn't have an ID, right? Let's look at what we got as a response. Yes, it has an ID. Now let's ask it, it's so smart. That let's do Control Alt P, write test that checks the email is what was sent. Not telling what was sent. It needs it's telling me in the body. And let's see what happens. Okay, so it created email should match the sent value, and it checks that it is guild.testguild.com.8. Wow, smarter than a few days ago. So you can use this to generate tests, less for actual code pieces, but it's starting to look a lot smarter than it used to be, which is cool. So you can use that as well. So it's not just the snippets that can help you, it's also the bot. But like I said, generating the code is one part of the. Let's look at this here. So I can write status tests for the user was created. Let's hide it a bit here. So for the users, I check the status, okay, pass the data, save the ID, and store it so I can use it in the chain of the get. And then check that this one got 200, and same with the delete, that delete got. This is like checking it got either a 200 or 204. Nice. But is that enough? Just checking status? Well, can check a bit more to be more precise. So for example, user should be created, and you see that I'm giving it better names than just checking the status. And this one checks that the returned value when I'm doing an add checks what I sent, and it stores the user ID name in the email. So when I do a test in get, I can compare them, the user ID, the name, and the email to what I got in the get, because I'm also expecting that. And remember, this is a translation of what we're doing with our eyes, like without thinking. We're looking at these values, looking if they are the same. And we need to translate that into program, to Postmanese, for it to work. Delete, for example, doesn't return anything, so I can check that the user was deleted. And it's not even that, because if I want to actually check this scenario, it's not just these APIs. If I add a user, I want to make sure that the user is in the list of get all users, right? So I do user created, get user, and then I need to check that the user is in the user list. Now, have a look at this. So this is a get all users API. We saw it in the beginning. And you see that it's not the same JSON that is returned from the add. It's different because this one's an array of things that looks like were the things that were returned in the add or the get. So in order to extract this, I need some code that looks like this. I need to check that if the user ID is in the returned list. I don't know where it is on the list, right? So I need to prepare some list that I have, do a for loop, go over all the things that are in the JSON array. You see that I'm using JSON length because that's the length of the array that I got. And I'm pushing all the IDs because JSON data of index I dot ID is the ID there. And I'm putting all the IDs in the array, and I'm checking my user ID is in the array itself. Again, this is programming. This is like you need to know what you're doing. This is maybe the bot will be smart enough to do this for you. I'm probably guessing no. This is actual programming. If you want to even go a bit further, a lot of the things that the errors that I went through today was because the email was there, right? Because it doesn't allow more than one unique email. So I wrote something to delete, where is it? Here. Delete the existing, delete an existing user with this email. How does it work? Well, first, I'm using the get to get all the users, just as we did a minute ago. So it creates all these kind of JSON stuff. Yeah, like this. Now I'm going over the things that I got, all the JSON stuff, looking for something with the email with guild.testingguild.com. Then I need to use something called send request, which is Postman's ability to run a request within a bit of code. You can do this pre-request, post-response, whatever. So what I'm trying to do is get if there is a record called guild.skill.com, and then trying to send a request to the same API with a delete, with the ID that I got, and delete it. Again, this is actual programming. So this is like developer stuff. You need to know what you're stepping into. Okay, demo indeed. So can you do everything? Well, so it works like this. First, I told you what you need to do, the basic stuff. Snippets will help you. The bot might help you. But you need to know what you're doing. This is like programming. I need to do this and then need to do this and this and this in order to do these things together. It's not like coming out of the blue, out of your mind. It takes a lot of practice. And if you do this correctly, by the end, you'll be as good as a programmer, really. What can it do? Well, this is where Postman comes with a couple of labels that I will give it. It's not an IDE. An IDE is what we call an integrated development environment, which is where developers live like that. When we're talking about their main tool is an IDE. IDEs have syntax highlighting, code highlighting, like we saw, Postman has that, but it doesn't have a debugger. It doesn't tell you that other than something is wrong. It can't really help you. It doesn't have code navigation. You can spread a lot of code in different places. You need to know where to look to find it, because otherwise it doesn't have any capabilities of, like, rather than search for something. And you need to know what you're searching for. So it's not a complete development environment. And this is why I advise even people who got to being a programmers inside Postman to really stop, put the brakes on, because you don't really put code in there because you need to manage it. Also remember, the code that we're writing is outside of version control. It's not, basically, if you think about it, you have code that you're testing, our application. It has a version. It sits in source control, has some kind of a label, whatever you're using, or a tag, whatever. This is a version, and a version comes with its own tests. If you later upgrade the version of the code, you might want to upgrade the version of the tests. Postman lives outside source control, so you needed to manage that yourself. And it's very easy to change / break stuff inside Postman. And how do you get back to what happened before? It's not as easy where everything sits under source control. So what have we done today? What have I showed you, and what should you do next? We talked about the magic of automation, and you've seen that Postman has a lot of things that it gives you in order to do the first steps. The snippets, the bot, the visualization, the creating variables like with a couple of mouse clicks. It does a lot for you to move forward, to run things automatically. The collection runner, as problematic as it is, you can run things and you can see all the tests and so on. And you can do a bit more than that. So the building blocks are there for you to use. What I would like you to try is to play with that and like work on this on sample sites like GoRest, or go into your own thing, your own project, and do these kind of things and try to see how it fits your work. If you like it, if you understand what you're doing and you can move forward, good. But have a developer with you, not on the computer that you're working, but you are going to get stuck. This stays simple for a very short time. You will probably need something more complex as you're going. So if you have the confidence, good, move forward, but you will need the support, and you will need the support of someone who programs for a living or knows how to program. Maybe doesn't get the money, but knows how to structure things, and build things in order to get to what you want. Because I already showed you today something that are kind of a simple things for developers, but to get to what we want is like update the status. This is something that usually people need to learn how to do, and this is not something that we learn at tester school. So try it. That's all I ask you, and see how it works for you, and hopefully it will work for you. If it works for you too well, this is like stopping and thinking, okay, what's next? How do you do automation? Like in scale, we're talking about like in real work. And like the examples that I showed you today, the code that I wrote can be in Postman for these kind of purposes, but I would think of other alternatives of where to put this code. For example, the code that deletes something before I run it, like with existing email, I would probably not put it in Postman. I would probably run it in the CI as a step before I run my tests. So the automation never stops, and that's good. And I want you to try it and see where you stop, or maybe you won't. So I hope you enjoyed and it was valuable for you today. Like I said, if you want more information on the courses and workshops that I give me a shout out. I want to thank you again for coming today, and hope you had the rest of the year to party like it's my birthday today. Have a nice day.